Hello, everyone. Thank you for staying with us. Now, before we begin the following panel discussion, I want you to pause for a moment and think about what the future of nuclear will look like 20 to 30 years from now. Let me give you a clue. Nuclear reactors in your backyard. Not literally, but you get the idea. But to get to this point, all parties involved must have a seat on the table. And I'm not just talking about the supply chain. I'm also talking about industry experts and safety regulators. This is why it's my pleasure to dive deeper into the conversation of international collaboration in the supply chain by introducing the following panel of speakers. Please join me at welcoming Aline Descloizeaux, Director of Nuclear Power Division at the International Atomic Energy Agency. We also have Nathan Patterson, Senior Program Lead Supply Chain at the World Nuclear Association. We have Véronique Rouillet, Head of the Division of Nuclear Safety Technologies at the Nuclear Energy Agency. And last but definitely not least, it's Jérémy Hubert, Nuclear Safety Inspector at the Nuclear Safety Authority. Welcome, everybody. Now, a lot has passed since the last time you all gathered in the same table. This is not the first time that you discussed the topic of international collaboration. And when I mean it's not the first time, is all of the different parties involved here. But it is the very first time since 2018. That's when you all had a 2-day workshop, right? Just specifically discussing the subject of international collaboration in the supply chain. So, Véronique, I would love to start with you. Like I said, a lot has happened then since the past 5 years. We've had pandemics, we've had geopolitical conflicts, we've had nationalist movements promoting deglobalization. So how has all of this impacted the international collaboration in the supply chain?
Thank you very much for your introduction, and I will do my best to summarize that. It's, I think, a difficult exercise, but anyway. So, first of all, everybody knows that about the overall context, and the overall context had changed for nuclear energy. My colleagues will come back to this for sure. In short, about supply chain organization, I would say that the organization is historically based on verticality, some verticality, a customer, a utility, with main big suppliers, with a great experience on nuclear requirements, with an experience on large projects and so on. But there's some verticality here. And there's also, of course, the organization of the suppliers is spread all over the world, with some components that are dependent to some countries and so on. And there is also, in this organization, a very important part, which is the local network. So the collaboration between these companies, I guess, was in place, but with a kind of verticality. And today, we are evolving more towards more globalization, declining number of suppliers, less skills in some regions. And we have also a shift in the center of expertise due to the new projects in particular. So the environment change raised new questions. In the past, perhaps they were embarked on one type of project. Now they could be embarked in very different type of projects, each supplier. And they all have to consider quality culture, safety culture as the highest priority. And the discussion in 2008 was focused on this point, not only, but this discussion embarked regulators. It was organized by regulators at that time. It was the first time where we organized such a workshop. And it was it's like a precedent. It was in the framework of a multi-design evaluation program where a specific group was focused on vendor inspection cooperation, and it was led by regulators because they, at that time, they understood the need to discuss together and to discuss for perhaps the first time more openly with industry. And now what we can see is that this needs increase a lot due to the new context that we heard about yesterday and that my colleague will perhaps detail later. So this dialogue should really be more important and perhaps more concrete, I guess.
Now, Alina, one of the big challenges that we will be experiencing is the increase of modular reactors and new countries, well, as new countries opt for nuclear. So currently we have around 440 operable reactors in 32 countries. How many more operable reactors do you envision having by 2050?
So thank you. So we, in the International Atomic Energy Agency, our forecast is more than double for 2050, the nuclear power capacity. And so we don't know yet if it's between large nuclear power plants, small modular, it's still an ongoing discussion.
So 250 new reactors in 2050?
So what we see is that for 1 gigawatt, if you look at the size of small modular reactors, maybe you need 4 to 5 modular SMR per gigawatt. And so we are speaking now in terms of hundreds of reactors, but thousands of SMRs that will be deployed in the next decades. And to have the economy of scale that is necessary to be comparable to large nuclear power plant, serial production is really an answer for the SMRs. And that's why in the IAEA we have launched a program, an initiative which is called NESI, Nuclear Harmonization and Standardization Initiative, working both with regulators and also with the industry. And regarding the supply chain in particular, we are working on common approaches to codes and standards, looking at the different codes and standards applying to the supply chain and working with different international organizations, in particular WNE, on this harmonization. And I would say also that for the supply chain, there are at least 3 challenges for me, which is obsolescence, bottlenecks, and mixing both innovative processes but also proven processes. So to face that, we also work under this NESI initiative in the agency on different topics. And for example, we have developed a paper which explains why serially manufactured industrial products are crucial for reliable deployment of SMRs.
So we will not be only having these many reactors, but of course, as we've mentioned so far, they will be decreasing heavily in size. This, of course, brings us to new materials, new technology, and new safety regulations. So can you briefly, very briefly provide context in, how supply chain can contribute to safer nuclear plants?
Yes. Well, good afternoon, everyone. The question really here, I think, covers a lot of ground. Essentially, what we're talking about here is what the supply chain can do for the overall ecosystem of making sure that the plants are safe, number one, obviously, operable for a sustainable and long-term amount of time, and the whole business environment around what nuclear as an asset can deliver. Now, there's various things that we see growth in from a WNE point of view. Certainly a lot more consideration about how to adopt digital aspects into the supply chain and really gather that amount of data, real-time data, to help inform how that equipment in the supply chain is being used on the operating reactor, and in many cases take decisions off the back of that. So there's a really kind of paradigm shift that we see changing, that gone are the days where it is going to be delivering equipment and sticking to a kind of periodic inspection and maintenance schedule that might have been decided right back in the days of licensing, but there's a certain trend for a supply chain that's going to be evolving over the course of the construction and the operating fleet. So that the supply chain, in essence, can bring forward innovation that will help streamline and remove some of the bureaucracy and some of the aspects where time is being focused on areas that aren't really delivering the best value for the overall fleet.
So looking at some context, Nathan, now that I'm with you right now, let's talk about some of the biggest challenges that you've seen in the past 5 years when it comes to supply chain, from the organizational procedures point of view.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think one of the ones that I would kick off with, and I'm sure people would have noticed this when they walk around this great event, is the amount of companies that are standing up with a badge of pride talking about how they are getting a certification to international standards that really embed an understanding about what it means to be involved within the nuclear industry. So certainly in France, there's a trend, an uptake in certification to ISO 19443. That's also the case in some other areas within Europe. So essentially we see in the past 5 years a trend for more companies getting certification to these nuclear quality management systems. But also we see a trend for, as I alluded to earlier on, the types of supply chain solutions that are being offered. There is more new supply chain aspects regarding services, about how we can do inspection and maintenance in a more cost-productive way and a more faster way during shutdowns. Some of the robotic solutions that have came to market over the past 3 years have certainly reduced what would have taken in the past a much longer duration to do certain types of inspection. And off the back of that is really, as I say, helping things move in a positive direction for really understanding the needs of what the nuclear asset require. And I think that's where the supply chain have been moving. So in many cases, certain suppliers are really developing that nuclear know-how. But also at the other end of the spectrum, and we can't forget this as well, is in many cases to be involved in a nuclear project, if you're right down the supply chain, it's not always the same understanding that you need to have for your product if you're right at the top tier 1 suppliers. And by this, I'm really talking about the growth we're seeing in the interest for commercial off-the-shelf items and industrial grade items. So we need to take a graded approach to this aspect, and when things are kind of lower down the spectrum for delivering a safety function, we're seeing a lot of licensees and suppliers look to commercial off-the-shelf items for helping deliver part of that supply chain solution. For the existing fleet, certainly for obsolescence management issues, but also a lot of the SMR products that are going to be offered are proposing a large amount of commercial items as part of their whole system configuration.
So when it comes to the supply chain, direct to the point here, name 3 main challenges that we're facing today.
Okay, well, for me, I would say number 1, but I might be a little bit biased in this, coming from a nuclear association like the WNE, who's trying to look at where things are going to lead over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years and make sure that the whole business environment is ready for that. And I would say one of the main things is real specific foresight about when there's going to be new projects coming online, when there's going to be long-term operation windows of refurbishment that are going to be required. So we can really plan way ahead. I'm talking about 10, 15 years ahead, and understand, do we potentially have an area where there's going to be many projects that are going to be produced or want to be produced at the same time, and the supply chain has to know about this way in advance so it can, in many cases, adapt its capability and capacity, because we certainly don't want any bottlenecks 10 years down the line when we have this fantastic wave of new build and much more long-term operation coming along the line. We see about 140 refurbishment projects that are going to be needed by 2040, and that's going to be in collaboration with new builds, probably chapping the door towards about $2 trillion that will need to be invested in the supply chain. Now, there has to be some more certainty about when these projects will take place and when the procurement is going to be required for them, so the suppliers can really plan ahead and get involved in those projects. So I think number one, I would say, is planning, and that's in collaboration with governments and industrial strategies, because in many cases, if we're going to get involved in newcomer countries, it's getting that localization strategy and that balance of global and local supply in place.
So to summarize it, the first main challenge right now is?
Planning ahead, foresight planning.
Second?
Involvement of governments for the industrial strategy.
And
the third, the balance of a local supply chain and global supply chain on a project.
Excellent. Now, another big challenge coming ahead is the competition between reactors and suppliers. So how would you handle that when it comes to international cooperation?
Is that for me? In the WNE, we promote a healthy competition where we bring together all the main players, essentially, from the nuclear industry, be it experienced vendors and a lot of startups, to look at those common issues. So I think the kind of healthy aspect is having people working together on common issues, which might be how can the adoption of new enabling technologies, be advanced manufacturing, the use of digital twins, and some of these areas that are quite common to a lot of reactor vendors that they want to bring more into the market, getting this kind of common working going on at the same time, and understanding where there's going to be supply chain mapping that's going to take place. So really understand where will we be manufacturing the large heavy forged vessels, for example. And when we start having that conversation in a pragmatic way, a lot of the vendors might realize that there's actually quite a small pool of suppliers, and we need to make sure we're not all going to be trying to tap into the same suppliers way down the line, because that's where there could be challenges and could be issues. So the competition starts way, way ahead by preparing for the future.
All right. Now, I just want to jump to Véronique right now. You know, with the expansion of reactors, there has to come a lot of innovation here. And that means that there will be new technology coming ahead. So as an expert in nuclear tech yourself, Véronique, what type of new technology can we expect that can pose some challenges within the next few years? So let's just name them, you know, anything that pops into your head right now, and then we'll elaborate on them.
If you tell me what you imagine as new technology, it's a so global world. You have new designs of nuclear facilities, but you have also new technologies in general, which is not the same. If you are discussing, for example, new design of technologies, you have new fuels, you have new components, and the discussion is absolutely not the same. If you are thinking about nuclear fuel, here you have a lot of challenges, technical challenges, qualification challenges, and so on. If you are discussing about components, new techniques, it's another story. But I think that in both areas, you have the question of how, the main challenge is how to qualify, how to verify, especially the quality of the product. And the timeline for in the two cases are absolutely not the same if you are discussing about fuel or if you are discussing about components. And the other important point is about, if I mention here technical and more technical challenges, is about how you demonstrate the quality of the products and the safety of the nuclear power plants. I think in general it is a challenge, and that's why in this discussion you need to involve all the stakeholders, and especially you need to involve early, very early in the discussion, the regulators, all the people in charge of standards, codification and so on, because they have to be associated to this discussion.
So how do you improve that conversation then, that communication between all those stakeholders when it comes to new technology?
I think it's a big deal. It's a big deal. And in addition, it's a big deal because at each, you have competition in the discussion. And the big deal is also that, well, I'm in charge of safety issues, so that's why perhaps I'm focused on this. But in any step, you have to have a very clear view of the responsibility and the risk, and including emerging risk, and you have to discuss that all together, and you have to agree on this at one point. So I think it is very challenging, and for that, I think we can put in place some conversation about innovation on the technical area. We have to associate different actors on research activities as well, on specific points, and this is the role of our organizations, I guess, to do that and to help in that.
So with every challenge, there comes opportunities, right? With every crisis, with every challenge. So what new opportunities for international collaboration do you see here with these new challenges regarding technology?
The opportunities, well, there are different areas where we have opportunities. I discussed more technical areas, but there are also other areas where perhaps it's important to have a common, I would not say a common view, but convergence in the views. The first is about acceptability. When you discuss this question of validation, qualification, and so on, the question behind is, what is acceptable? What is acceptable for everyone with his constraints, financial constraints, resources constraints, and so on, or the public? And so here, I think international collaboration can help to discuss in open debates these questions. So acceptability, I think it's something I don't think that we spoke about this from the beginning of this conference. But at the end, when you will have a new facility somewhere, you will have to deal with that. So this is the first point. The second point, the obvious point, is about quality. All the debates that, well, the different examples that have been provided, we have to continue the effort on new ISO standards that the 443 that has been put in place recently. I'm not a specialist. And this is a factor also to share confidence between the actors, between customers, regulators, and the public. And the last, perhaps, area where international collaboration can help is about the question of fraudulent and counterfeit items. On this point, one thing that has to be clearly discussed and coordinate, I guess, is transparency. How we can increase transparency on this topic. How to better inform, how to inform more about this, how to take the maximum of benefit of all the past experience on this and how to communicate on this and use this. This discussion can be an open discussion between at the international level, I guess.
Now, Jeremy, I want to jump with you. You know, he has an incredibly important role as well, and that is you make sure everybody has a good sleep at night having a nuclear reactor in your backyard, as I was saying before. You are in charge of all the regulation, of all the safety regulation, and that everybody ticks all the boxes in that inspection. So, what are the expectations? The goal of the international collaboration between regulators in the years to come?
Thank you for your question. So today's supply chain is global, and that's the important message I want to say today. That means any factory located in any country can deliver to many nuclear plants on different continents. There is no longer a limitation with borders, and this creates a real challenge for the supply chain to be able to deliver components by following various regulations. And considering this context, the crucial goal for the regulators is to be transparent regarding our regulation and our expectation for the supply chain. And this is why in 2008, it was decided to create a working group on supply chain, WGSUP. But in 2023, we decided to extend this group, and now we're 25 countries plus international organization together. And our goal is to facilitate this exchange of information between countries, to get closer global harmonization of approaches, that means common position between regulators to avoid to have the different point of views, to focus the attention of all stakeholders on areas of emerging risk. We will talk later about CFSI, and also to highlight and especially promote good practices. And one quick example I want to give, it's we have been working, for example, with the World Nuclear Association, with Nathan, on the WGSUP and the World Nuclear Association, on giving feedback, organizing a workshop on the commercial grade dedication. What is the feedback we can have? And then industry and regulators are around the same table discussing this topic.
All right. Now, with all the changes that are coming ahead, I'm sure there will be some kind of new protocol, maybe some sort of new rules coming ahead. I don't know if you can think about right now what differences or what changes in protocol will we have in this sense, and how international collaboration plays a role in this?
Mm-hmm. So I want to avoid focusing on any one country or any regulators, as today's discussion is really global supply chain. And for this purpose, so the WGSUP working group on supply chain has been working on publishing on the web page. If you put on the internet WGSUP, we have just created a web page, and we'll put the publication very soon. The common position, it means what do we have in common, the regulators together, and what do we expect from the supply chain. And I want to give you some example. The first common position we will publish very soon will be about CFSI. So the goal will be to compare between the 25 countries, the approaches on CFSI, and to select and promote the best practices from regulators' point of view. The second will be to issue a technical report on safety cultures. I will say a word after about safety culture, because that's the main topic we need to discuss for the supply chain. There is a direct link between supply chain and nuclear safety, so we'll issue a technical report on this topic. You will find a press release, because now we're going to publish, that's new for regulators, but some press release on the multinational we conducted in Japan with 6 countries together. And the program of work, that will be the last publication, will be to see, I repeat myself, but what do we have in common? What is the expectation, the common expectation for a supplier anywhere in the world where it's located? Because we consider this as a key aspect to ensure the nuclear safety. If we say this is what we have in common, this is important, then you need to follow these practices, you need to follow this regulation. And as Nathan said, we need, for example, one of example of common position we need to have is to work on artificial intelligence, because that can be a main topic for the next years.
Now, we're also expecting lots of competition between reactors and suppliers, like we were mentioning before. So I'm curious, this all can lead to fraudulent licensing, as they are all competing to get the clients and all that. So how are you handling all this, the fraud aspect?
It's a challenge today for the supply chain. We need that there is I don't know if there is an increase of CFSI, but at least we detect more CFSI today. But before I can say that, how do we handle it, we need to understand where it's come from. And that's why I just want to say a quick word about the fraud triangle. When you have a CFSI, that means someone intentionally produced a fraud or counterfeit items, there is a motivation behind. And that means it's really the reason why there is a CFSI. The person who is creating the CFSI can be pressure at work, economic factors, objective you can't have. So you have your motivation to do. After you have a justification, the person who is doing a CFSI needs to relieve himself the responsibility. And usually what you can hear, I know my job, what I did has no impact on the nuclear safety. It's a lack of safety culture. And also you need an opportunity. You had the opportunity to do a CFSI. It means you don't have audits, absence of technical control, lack of questioning attitude. But if you're able to monitor these three key factors, no, you remove the motivation. You give objective you can access. You remove the justification, safety culture implemented in the factory. And you remove the opportunity, you do technical control, you can reduce the CFSI. And that's why, as regulators today, together, the 25 countries, we are going to issue this technical report on safety culture. We are going to check in the factories all the safety culture is implemented. We are going to ensure that integrity of data, that means when the data is taken, when you do your activity to when it's released on the certificate, it needs to be exactly the same data. We are going to, I can't say check, but encourage the new tools like digitalization or computerization. And finally, we are all saying, all regulators, that any CFSI needs to be reported. We need to know where the CFSI is coming from and to report this to any regulator.
Now, even though your job is to control the nuclear industry and not to be friends with it, of course, there shouldn't be a disconnect from it, right?
Absolutely true. But the prime purpose of the regulators is to ensure that the nuclear licensee operate their facilities at all times in the safe manner. That's the prime purpose. And so to be able to do so, meaning to be able to do this control, to be this inspection, the characteristics of the regulators are to be safety focused, independent, transparent, and open. That's the first point. But if today all regulators conduct inspection, meaning direct and indirect inspection of the supply chain, when I say open, the last one, it has another meaning in 2023. It's not open like we were 15 years ago. We need to engage and we need to support the supply chain because we know today that the supply chain is facing new opportunities, new SMR, EPR2 in France, new build abroad, but also challenges. CFSI is one of the challenges. And so that's why we have been decided, and I hope we can see the flyer on the behind, if it's possible to project it. We have been decided to host a workshop that will be hosted with the NEA in 2024, so in collaboration with the World Nuclear Association and IAEA. And the goal from the regulators is directly to engage with the industry. So it will be a 2-day workshop. We will challenge the audience and all participants. And the goal is to have the outcomes of this workshop as an action plan for the following year. And so we will have, I just told you, we have created WGSUP web page. We'll have the registration on this web page. But once again, this is the way regulators will interact with the supply chain. And this is the way that we can know, okay, being at this workshop, what are the challenges you're facing? Where do you need help?
Aline, I want to go and I want to jump with you. Where can we start building more transparency on the international collaboration perspective? Is there a starting point in here?
Well, the IAEA has a long time experience of collaboration between different stakeholders, and it has started such a long time ago. And we are very pragmatic people, so we build the experience from the difference of different stakeholders. And I can take, for example, one, you spoke about innovation and how it's incorporated in the supply chain. For example, if I take advanced manufacturing, which is one of the innovation which is nowadays in all mechanical industry, and how to apply it to nuclear. When we look at the different codes and standards applying to the supply chain around the world, and we see it really as an opportunity to have something which is harmonized. Why would we have different international or national or regional codes and standards for advanced manufacturing? Why wouldn't we work together to do only one applying to all the supply chain? This is, I think, it's never too late to start this kind of international work together, harmonization. And this is really the message, one of the message of today. We also have a network on innovation, working also on a regulatory aspect, for example, of artificial intelligence. And we bring, as an international platform, all actors together, all stakeholders, not only regulators on one side and the industry on the other side, but all together to exchange. Also maybe something that we, coming back to the SMRs, something that we see also is all these regional initiatives regarding harmonization. For example, regulatory work done in the US, UK, Canada sphere, and the Alliance for SMRs also in the European sphere. And also we see our role as international organization as a harmonizer of the harmonizers somewhere. I think this is also important in the emergence of this global supply chain.
Right. Now, before this moderation, as we were preparing for this talk, you told me that Eastern Europe is the main region dependent on this type of international cooperation. So Eastern Europe. How can we build on this?
Well, it's not the only region of the world, but as we are having this WNE in France and in Europe, I thought it was important, for example, to say that there are what we call expanding countries. It means countries that have operating nuclear power reactors that want to expand, but have not built nuclear power plants since quite a while. And also newcomer countries, embarking countries in Eastern Europe. I can quote Poland, as they have a big stand here. And all these countries, they still are in the supply chain. They still are building a very present industry in the supply chain. So I think that collaboration between reactor developers and the supply chain industry that are present and very active in those countries is really a success, will be a success story.
So, and we're also seeing more reactors now in Asia too. Are we expecting more reactors or this nuclear movement, for example, in Latin America or in all the Americas, or maybe in Africa? In Africa, we only have one reactor in South Africa.
Yes, well, in the IAEA we follow more than 27 countries in what we call the milestones approach, but we have many more countries, maybe 20, that are also knocking at the door, at least to develop that. But it takes time to develop the necessary nuclear infrastructure in a country to get access to nuclear power. And it's everywhere, as you said. It's in Asia, it's in Africa, in Latin America. So this is, I think that many countries have understood that this is a really, nuclear power is really a solution to global warming. And I think that we need to have a consistent approach. We need to build trust in the supply chain, as it is a thematic of today, to gain public acceptance. Because even if it's a global supply chain, global issue, climate change, nuclear power is a country sovereign decision, And public acceptance is really key for that. And we have to work all together and to build trust together, so that the message comes from not in my backyard to yes in my backyard.
Right, yes, to increase confidence, to increase trust in nuclear plants and in international collaboration, of course. So, wrapping up, you all have different views. You all come from different backgrounds, from different positions when it comes to this supply chain and to make this nuclear movement happen. But what is the common one here when it comes to international collaboration? Let's start with Nathan here.
Yeah, and I really think that is one of the most fundamental questions. And that, for me, the answer is we focus on the main priority areas together. You heard Jeremy mention about the regulators looking at a common position on CFSI. Within the industry association, our members have also been looking at that. We also look at how quality is embedded. We also look at how much demand is going to be required. You heard about the agency looking at that as well and their projections. So I think for me, it's we come together to agree where are the priority areas, and we work on sometimes similar questions, but pushing certainly all in the same direction. And from a WNE perspective, we try and enable that platform to allow the nuclear industry and a lot of the suppliers from all different tiers to come to the table and voice their opinion to support the direction of travel. And I think that's the main thing. We all try and enable our different audiences to provide their views on where we want to move things forward.
Veronique, you want to pick up from there? So what is the common one here? You all have different views. What is the common view in here? And any last message that you would like to share with the audience?
A last message? Last message is that supply chain challenge, it's not a philosophy, it's a reality. So, and especially one point, I'm not sure we discussed this point, is about resources and necessary resources issues. Because we have here a compromise between innovation, between quality, between competitiveness, and that is to say that supply chain actors have to find the necessary resources and skills, and especially in all the network, including the local ones. So. It's not about philosophy, it's about reality, and we have to provide solutions. So we have to work together about these solutions. And we have to add the solutions, not to compete between the solutions. And, well, I think international cooperation is a tool in this sense on technical specific topics that we mentioned, but also on general topics like acceptability and so on.
That's so interesting what you said about not to compete with the solutions, just work really together and in one main solution. Because of course everybody has their own alternative, their own way of doing things. So searching a middle ground and really working towards it instead of just being overwhelmed with many solutions. Jeremy, so again, we have different points of view in here, all of you. What is the common one? And lastly, any message that you want to share?
What is important to explain is there is a direct connection, what I said before, between the supply chain, a worker that is doing a daily work in a factory, and the nuclear safety. Any components you manufacture in a factory will be a day used on a nuclear plant. So that's the key message regulators need to explain. And that's why today we engage, because sometimes the industry is far from regulators or can be far from the nuclear plant. And that's why today regulators engage directly with the industry. I talked about the workshop. We are doing conference like today. We are today. And so we need to continue to be all together and to be transparent and to give back trust on the supply chain. And for example, we have very fast saying that the ISO 19443 is one way to help. In this case, the regulators has to be behind and support the supply chain to go to this kind of, I wouldn't say protocol, but certification or any tools that can be used. And once again, the tools we are going to publish on our web page will be an help, will be a real help, and I hope support all the industry to bring back the trust and to keep any equipment that is manufactured safe.
If I may just, I would like to remind that this process of codification historically is very slow. And why? For different reasons, especially by the fact that people that are engaged in these topics, they are not paid. They are experts that are distributed all over the world. And you have not really an objective clear with people that are working on this. It is my understanding. So, well, perhaps we can change something on this to have people that are really focused on this question and can work more on this. It's an example.
Thank you so much, Veronique. And lastly, but definitely not least, any final messages, anything that you can say, okay, so this is the common ground here.
The first message is please come to the workshop of next year first. No, don't forget this.
We all agree.
Last message is a message that we want to really pass in the agency. It's let's make it together simpler. Okay, nuclear together simpler.
Less is more. Let's make it simple. Let's make it direct to the point. I like that. No, definitely lots of food for thought in here. Thank you so much to our very distinguished panel of speakers. So like they all said, they will be hosting their next 2-day workshop next year in March. That would be 6 years after the last workshop. 6 years. So I'm so sure that there will be tons of stuff that they're going to be talking about in there. Many new procedures, so be sure to be there if you can. Again, that's going to be in March, and it's going to be a 2-day conference. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's keep working together. Let's keep going into one solution. Let's keep it simple. But let's act. Let's work. Thank you so much, and I think that is it. Time is up. Bon appétit, and I'll see you back in a few at 2 p.m.
Thank you.